for the recording. Okay, so last time we got up to where it says over here, El Chanio Sen Chanio Beis Chanon, and there he says I'm skipping around a bit because as we said last time we would do. It says, "Can be Eshechiv Castius Galilus Hachanios Aresh Chor Kokhba Shvechim Espasar Eretz Yisrael." I was looking through Josephus. I went through Josephus once a long time ago, and I basically remember none of it. History is far more detailed, obviously, than we have in Shas, in either Talmud, and there are many names which we don't really recognize in our from our own limited historical perspective. So obviously Rabbi Lapp was very conversant with them. So he says, so until Especianos destroyed Israel, it's about 2 years, and the Sanhedrin Gadol Shemunu Kanoi Beis Milchama, after Yosef Tluya Baromi, the Dana Paskin Flashos, Loya Shablisha Gazis, even though they were not contingent Rome, they were independent. Nevertheless, they too did not want to do the Flashos, because the Gemara says that Fisher wrote him. Where they sat out to Yerushalmi, the other Sanhedrin, the real Sanhedrin, Charvu, they were destroyed because everything was obviously part of the Great War. So they sent Yerushalmi. Then they took the Sanhedrin to the Lishkas Agazis. As long as the Sanhedrin is now in the Lishkas Agazis, you can't do the Nefashos. Anyway, that I'm going to say the rest outside. It says, nevertheless, they judged him, and again, this stuff which we're not familiar with. They decided we're not going to put him to death, but 2 Kanoim then went and killed him anyway. And he says that at the end here, Pimash Chutz so Rashi Beis Yosef, the Choshen Mishnah Sosin Shin Peches, Shalom Yamru Dvarim Halol El B'dinei Yisrael V'Gzeres HaKosov. Adinim Achusa Ein Mashkichim Chol Elu. All the parameters which we have about the death penalty are only when we're judging based on the Sanhedrin. But if there's the Sanhedrin cannot operate for whatever reason, it's not effective, there's the Constantine Machusa. And evidently these Biryonim, they saw themselves in the last years of the existence of the Beis HaMikdash as the Malchus. They were, in fact, in control of Yerushalmi. So therefore, they took upon themselves, Shem Iyat Omer Kain, Eloshata Mamira called the Torah Sanhedrin, Halam Shamein, Sheyirbu Dovrei Sheker Akalashono. If everything in this world depends on being a Sanhedrin, then Judaism can't operate as a society, because we don't have a Sanhedrin most of the time. So what are we supposed to do in cases of extremity? So therefore he says, "V'mamasu amru kain koshkin bebogin." So the Rashba says you can put a Moser to death, even if somebody who's Moser to the non-Jews, even without a Sanhedrin. So certainly he says, and I don't know when the story of Zchariah ben Baruch, then he was a traitor. So he says that, okay, you know what? That's it. So if he's a traitor, we can put to death even without a Sanhedrin. So Sanhedrin found him exempted from the death penalty, but nevertheless, the Biryonim with their executive capacity went and they killed him. Okay, so getting back to the text itself now. So now it says here, these people, from this Sanhedrin, Naflu Chalal, Mikdash Hashem, Ki Bochu Le'areg V'Yisareb Mikdash Hashem. They chose to die in the Beis HaMikdash when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. It brings that here, in footnote, V'zel Shana Sofer Di Cassius. Again, I don't know who these people are. But obviously not a Roman story. Hayudim Chashvu Oshem Yuchad. The Jews thought to be a special happiness. L'chom bebeit mikdasham, to find the Beis HaMikdash, l'akriv chayim bado, and to sacrifice their lives for it. Anshem l'chum mekomam be'ezras Yisrael. The people of the masses took their places as Yisrael. The chavrei based in Gadol Amalos, the man was a great Sanhedrin. There, this Sanhedrin on the steps. והכהנים בעזרת כהנים, and the כהנים בעזרת כהנים. ואף כמעט היה מספר אביהם, even though they're relatively few of them compared to the Romans, לא נוצחו, they were not able to be vanquished, עד אשר ראו חלק המקדש בוער באש. So they saw part of the base Hamikdash being destroyed in fire. אז נפלו בחפץ לבוא והחרב אויביהם. Then they fell willingly on the swords of their enemies. או הרגו איש את אחיו, or they killed each other. או קצו בסוך האש, they jumped into the fire. וכלום לא היה זה מובס, for all this is not a death, רק ניצחון, just a victory. ואושר גדול היה להם להיקבר תחת משואות מקדשם, as a great happiness for them to be buried underneath the torches of their Beis HaMikdash. Now, you know, it's almost Erev Tisha B'Av, and it's very hard to say something like this, but it sounds like a Hamas philosophy. We don't have this philosophy in Judaism. We don't believe that you're supposed to be buried buried under the fire of the Beis HaMikdash. We believe you try to live another day and try to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim in another way. But this obviously was the philosophy of the Biryonim at the time, was this philosophy of, if necessary, we'll just die with the Beis HaMikdash. Okay. Okay, so they prefer to be there, buried under torches. Then ask for mercy from the Hazarzim, this cruel tyrant Titus, and leave him alive, and take him into captivity. Rachavre based on Gadol, Ney based on Gadol, Shechim HaKanoim. Omer is a great sage which existed before the Sanhedrin, which was erected by the Kanoim. And had sat in these other locations outside Yerushalmi. And when they also came into the chamber of the hewn stone, those were able to save themselves from the anger of the Kanoim, of the zealots. Also, they left Yerushalmi, became the war by Yavne, and they gathered in the city of Yavne, by Yeshu Sham, and they dwelt there. So he says here, very interesting historical point about Yavne. So Muchach, we said from here, it's clear, Yavne Haya Oz Mispar Chachmei Tzro. Calling Mispar Chachmei Shara, so it's got to be, we say Teli Yavne Chachmei. I think when we learn this Gemara, we understand it to mean that he said, okay, give me Yavne, and I'll transplant all the Chachamim there. But that's not the way Rabbi Lapp understands it. I don't think it's Pashim Shat. There must have been a sizable number of Chachamim already there. Right? There are great. There are sages in Yavne who are greater than those in other cities. But he says, he says, but I never found such a thing. So that's what's understanding. Is I assume those are able to flee from the Kanoim and try to get out. It's Yashib Yavne. They settled in Yavne. And because Rabbi Yochanan Zaka asked Vespasian to sell them, and Bezenim Farish Mishnah Mesej Pei Tesam Aim and Mitzvah some as a Zakin Mamre. Lo Beisin Shebir over Lo Beisin Shebi Yavne, and Mazel Beisin go to Shiba Shalim. Now, if Yavne is only there after the basement is destroyed, what do you mean Beisin Shebi Yavne? Right? There was no Beisin Yavne before, at the time of Beis HaMikdash. Now, again, you can learn this differently. You could say, well, it means if there's a base in Yavne, because there's no base in Yerushalmi, we still can't do a Zaken Mamre there. But the simple shot is that you're not a base in the city, nor a base in Yavne, but a base of Yerushalmi, and that they coexisted. There was a base in Yavne at the same time as a base in possibly a base in Yerushalmi. Shama so the regal, they leave them there to the regal, Misa Sober regal. Gamliel Mishnah Shaman Muvenis. Right? So much because of something basic Yavne. V'lo Rav v'lo basic Acheres. Myself basic order. Why they say Yavne specifically, not some other city? Gamliel should be Yerushalayim. Why I say that based in Yerushalayim. Having Mara El so based on order be Yerushalayim. What do you mean? Shed Yerushalayim. That's in Yerushalayim. was in Yerushalmi, right? So obviously he's going to say that based on these diukim, right, that there was some sort of based in Yavne at that time, and then they collected more people, and as time went by, and Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, was able to save even more Chachamim that went to Yavne. Okay, so that's so he said, let's go to Yavne. Here is in this footnote here, which we're not going to do. He explains evidence that Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai himself was a Kohen. And that's not so important for us. So says based in Sefer Gadol Azos, Lazov Gamu Yerushalayim. He also left Yerushalayim. Vayvrach miYerushalayim kishana v'shnei chodashim v'nei Churban. And he fled Yerushalayim. It came out to a year and 2 months before the Churban. And here in this one over here, he makes the cheshbon why he assumes it's a year and 2 months before the Churban. And again, not going to get into that, but it wasn't right before the Churban occurred. So we know they went to Vespasian. He asked for him and for his friends. He let them learn there. Aspiasianus nothing as gave his request. And other requests that she made. Rosh Shimon bar Giora Garsi ben Achoso. Even though his nephew, this is clear from the Gemara again, was the head of the Biryonim, Shimon bar Giora, because he shir b'chaim leikum v'shalosav, nevertheless, he left him alive and fulfilled all of his requests. Biyado, because he knew, idea piko shekblu b'hem oivei roim b'Yerushalayim eschitzei shurba machanei roimi. Fascinating thing. Evidently, obviously, Rabbi Nosson, it says, and again, I don't know if Rabbi Nosson as well, but who remembers these things? That the Roman, what's the word? Collaborators, the Roman allies in Yerushalayim would shoot arrows with notes attached into the Roman camp, and they let the Romans know kama chashuv v'nechbad Yochanan Zakkai in Yerushalayim. Let them know how significant Yochanan Zakkai was in the eyes of people of Yerushalayim. Yachshav Hashem Yechayu, and he thought, I'm not sure who thought here, I guess the Vespasian, to have him alive, Yimalei Mishalosav, and fulfills the request. Yerushalayim become non-Yerushalayim. And this way Vespasian will get many friends among the distinguished people of the city. And they'll join the people already collaborating with him. Perhaps they're able to eliminate, to what's the word, restrain the spirit of the zealots, and the warriors, and they'll give him the city. Even though it might not succeed to open the gates of Yerushalayim, perhaps it'll help to weaken the spirit of the fighters. It won't have it difficult to win the war. Of course, it didn't happen, but that was what Vespasian was hoping would happen. He also settled there. And when, after time, the land settled down, and other Chachmei Torah who were saved from sword and from famine and from captivity came in, so they got the magic number 71. Olai Yosef, what happens? There's more. It seems there's more people than that. They appointed Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai to be the Nasi. Because the head of the original Sanhedrin, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Zaki Ne'arat, Kapian Yereb Kirani, Beton Africa, Bimea Milchama. When he wanted to arouse the spirit of the many rich Jews there to come to sister of the other Jews in Yerushalmi. And also, he wanted to meet with the Kohen Gadol, Yishmael ben Pabi, Shol ben Elisha, Mishpachas be Pabi, Shivlat Shami'ir Romi, who had fled there from Rome, where had been being held hostage. So the two Arugei Malchus, Rabban Shimon and Gamliel, the Sea Yisrael, Rabbi Shua ben Elisha, the Kohen Gadol, they were not killed in Eretz Yisrael. They were killed in Kairouan, which is a city in North Africa. Rabbi Shua ben Gamliel went there to try and arouse the Jews there, who were also under Roman domination. They were not free, but to try and arouse their spirit of rebellion. And Yishmael ben Pabi evidently been taken into captivity many years ago. That's what he's about to say. Shanima Shami Romi, they want to consult Mitzvah Romi about what's going wrong. They were both captured by the Romans and killed. I'm sure Gamliel Kishpat Mori B'Machos as a rebel. Machos Romi, but Shmuel ben Pabi Kishpat Borek because he was a refugee. Not a refugee. What's the word?
He fled from being captive.
Yeah, there's a word for that. Akiyashab Romi Hu Varoshki, because evidently before the destruction of Beis for many years, Hu Yashab Romi Hu Varoshki's Bari Mikdash, he and the head treasurer Beis Mikdash Shkilkio Leiravan as hostages. Omi Mea Kesar Neiron. Away from the days of the Nero. So he brings down here in the footnote the whole the story about a bunch of stories about them as as a Ruge Malchus and the Goro they made, who's going to go first, and and how Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Ben Bava cried and they put their clothing, and that doesn't. He says later. He says that really doesn't make sense because Rabbi Ben Bava and Rabbi Akiva were really active much later at the time of the Bar Kokhba rebellion. And that's going to say he's going to say there the two Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Elishas. This first one, who was killed together with Shin Gamliel, and the later one, the next one, who was the one whose skin was peeled off because he was so handsome and so on and so forth. They're not the same one. Okay. So and he goes through the history here. He proves that this is there are several of them. He says Bnei Yosifus writes Kosei B'Socha Achronim Shenoflu Romaim Yochanim Gdolim Yosef Yoshua Shulosei Milgan Kohen Gdolim Shlosh Bnei Yishmael Hayadua Shechatku Etzrosha B'Kirani. So they cut off his head in Kirani. Shumakon served Lo Diash Neraga Yishmael B'Kirani. And he says Shamshin Gamliel Azokim Yoshem Cholem Mechoma should see B'Yad Yochanan Levi, who was one of the rebels. He said, he evidently, I don't know which one of the two, was Rabbi Yishmael Gamliel or Yochanan Yosef. It was Yochanan Yosef, who was the one who said that they should take Josephus out of his generalship, removed from the Galilee, because he was not diligent. So Nasal Kirani, he must go to Kirani La'ir es Hayudim Asher Sham to arouse the Jews there. Lachish liyesh achem Yerushalmi bekesef ad shem milchama, sending money and soldiers. And Yosef is sefer sifro milchama sayudim shenitzibro mi blubin katolis aragim matim achar churban bekirani shlosha alafim yudim ashirim. So the 3,000 additional rich Jews were killed in Kairouan, not just these two great rabbis. There was evidently Kairouan was a very active and rich Jewish community. It was still so at the time. I think the Rif, or one of the great Rishonim, lived in Kairouan. I forget which one, but in any event, it was the big Ear of Yisrael. So Afki's got sefer Shema Kanaim Asher Bachra Piv Goro has been Chasban Shmuel Kohen Gadol. He was upset at what the Kanoim's appointment for Kohen Gadol, this guy Pinchas and Shmuel. He went against them. And then afterwards he made peace with them. Kohen Gadol, they married into the family. Shmuel Kirani Kohen Gadol Shmuel ben Pabi Sheshab Baromi Le'Ravon, Rosh Kizbrei HaMikdash Chilkia, Ubarach Mishal Kani, who fled to Kirani, Shanis Bishneim V'chot Kuz Rosham. V'lai Hargam Haya Katol, Usanam, Mavis Katols killed him. Kishochi Him Tzim Komas Rabbi. They sent emissaries to many places, Shador Yerushalmi Yehudim, Bakesh Eser Mehem, to ask for assistance, or some Mamachos, Achiros, Niskameg Ramaim, and to try and get other captured nations to rebel against the Romans. Titus of Shimon Bar Yochim and Levi. And this comes out of the words of Titus 2, Shimon Bar Yochim and Levi, the heads of rebellion Yerushalayim. Malachus shalachtem le'evin ha'pros la'yirsham mered. You sent messengers all over the world to try and provoke a rebellion against the Romans, and that's one of the reasons that he put them to death. Okay, so they took him and they didn't take Rabban Gamliel. And he discussed here why they didn't take Rabban Gamliel, who was the son of Shimon Gamliel. Some people say he was too young. He gives other reasons over here. But Rabban Gamliel, he says over here, was maybe 30 years old at the time, which also could have been too young. He definitely was more, Rabban Gamliel obviously was a friend of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua, and clearly he operated significantly later. So I know he wasn't that young, but evidently he was too young, or else they're afraid, since he was the son of Shimon Gamliel, who had just been killed, they couldn't take him, so they took Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instead, in the end, to be the Nasi, even though he wasn't a member of the family. He was actually, according to Rabbi Lap, says a Kohen. Okay. Now, as Gamliel ben Shimon Gamliel Nasi, after Finak Vayah, Shem those 30 years old, because they're afraid of the Romans don't see them arrayed. Like I just said, they killed his father as a rebel. Now, it's interesting. He didn't ask for the house of Shimon Gamliel. He asked Rabban Gamliel. He asked on the house of Rabban Gamliel. He already last killed for Shimon. He didn't want to answer Shimon Gamliel, so Shimon Gamliel got along with the rebels. So he said, "Okay, give me, the chain of the." It's like saying, going back and saying in England, Lahavdil, right? Give me the chain from Queen Victoria. Not going back in history and saying I want the chain of that house to remain intact. So this Sanhedrin judge I'll call mitzvah me'atorah ksuva mesora eza mitzvah tluya by mikdash. They checked which mitzvahs had to do with the Beis HaMikdash. This battle military Churban, and therefore was negated by the rights with its Churban. They said so it ain't tluya by mikdash, and what's not kedusha Beis HaMikdash, v'lo the Kokhba military gam Churban, and was not its the Torah authority was not lost on the Churban. Apirov chibu b'chol mitzvahs k'mo b'zach Beis HaMikdash kaim mirabbanan zech leMikdash. Mostly they said mitzvah should be intact mirabbanan. Ulam b'bon mitzvahs hakarbanos. Now, this is a very strange language, and he has a huge footnote here. What do you mean they decided the Bamos are also even after the Churban? So it's not so simple, because during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, there were Bamos. The most famous one is mentioned in the Gemara, Beis Chonio, which is in Egypt. And there were Korbanos brought there. And the Gemara talks about whether a Kohen who served in Beis Chonio, which was founded by one of the children of, I think, of Shimon Yochanan Kohen Gadol, who then was pushed off as his position there at Yisrael, whether those kind could serve in the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalmi. So it was a machlokes among the Chachamim, even at the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, if Bamos were mutter or not. And he says, Rabbi Lab says, it's an amazing concept. You think about many machlokos were decided in matters of kachim by the Sanhedrin after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. We think about them as being must have been true from time immemorial. Because after all, after Beis HaMikdash, what's the point? Right? And we're asking a couple of places, right? But no, there are several halachas which they actually determined afterwards. And this was a critical one, because they could have said, okay, you know what? Let's go back to Het Bamos. You want to bring back your Korban in No Failo, you want to bring back your Korban in Mutzi, because of date. Zech leMikdash. It was a major decision they had to make to
Mhm.
say there are no more karbanos, even though there's no more Beis Hamikdash. So that's he says החליטו שהבומס עשו את גם אחר קורבן, כי כשבואו לירושלים נעשו בומס לא היה לעמוד יותר. That was the conclusion. ואי אפשר לחייב אחר חורבן בקורבנות, you can't require after חורבן בקורבנות, לעשות בזה איזה מקדש, איזה מקדש, make some second מקדש. אשר ליבם היום מלא, תקווה, אשר מאירועי בני בית המקדש, יהיו פן ישכחו הכהנים towards קורבנות, since they're very afraid that basically should speedily rebuilt, and the Torah Karbanos will be forgotten. Because we built it, we're not going to know the laws. And also they also knew that not all Kohen of the Beis Hamikdash did avoid the same way. They had two Kohen who remained in Yavne. One said, when I have to sprinkle the blood on the Mizbeach inside the Mizbeach HaKtoros, I went around with my hand. I actually went around it by foot. And the possible matters, the Kohanim were not on the same page. This one did that, this one that. Therefore, they arranged all the Dinei Karbanos. They judged every halacha, even though they weren't no Ma'aser then, with the logic of their logic, but and determined how to arrange matters when Beis Hamikdash is going to rebuild. And then he brings out all these Mishnayos, which are arranged at this time. Any Stam Mishnah, Stam Gemara, not Gemara, Stam Mishnah in Seder Kochim is from this basin. Mishnayos Seder Kochim Yem Yishanos Meirov Mishnayos Dvarim Acherim. Mishnayos in Seder Kochim are older than other Mishnayos, not for the Rabbi Yerushalmi necessarily. They're a little bit still there from this time. But it's Tanas Tamidi Rabbi Yochanan Zakeh, so Lanach Gamliel, Tzir Yeshua, Nechlogim Peish Mishnah Achas Shishtam Sanhedrin as those. They're arguing one of the Mishnayos, which is learned this Sanhedrin. Kvianira Sider Oziv Ner Sanhedrin Shuas Mesech Kinim. Rabbi Yerushalmi Ben Yaakov Sider Oziv Mesech Midos. Shimon Shemitza Beis Mishnah Gamliel Zaken Sider Mesech Yuma. Tanoim Lona Dashmo Sider Mesech Tomid. Okay, now all this is a prelude to what's going to happen 49 years later. They're actually going to come to this third Beis Hamikdash. But in the meantime, we can leave it for next time. I did want to do is a fascinating footnote when he says, after this long discussion of Bamos, right, and whether where Bamos were used outside the Beis Hamikdash, the Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni, much more prevalent than we're aware of, right? There's extreme, like as you can see, extremely long footnotes here. Not going to go through them, but then he has a fascinating discussion here about where he says, he says, "Leman nashul mashkasam b'shani usovim shabamos mutaros b'chutzaros gam zar bayis achakach lidu shasuros." Uman lo yamar korei dvarim eila. So you, the reader, should not say shloit achesh b'yin gadol zeh l'akir kwanos b'chutzlaros you chiluchei dos b'chachmei so harishayim b'chachmei so achronim. It can't be that there was a machlekes about this between chachmei so at the time of the Beis Hamikdash and after the Beis Hamikdash. He was there raya meaning yoytzer gadol. I'm going to bring a raya from an even greater issue. Which had to do with the sustaining of the nation. And that never, and still there was a machlekes about it. Waging war on Shabbos. Okay, so we can leave that for next time, but it's a fascinating discussion. We think everything is kind of dry because we're living from the perspective of 2,000, 3,000 years later. But in fact, there was a big issue at the time of the Chashmonaim to allow to fight a war on Shabbos. Right? It's amazing. It was an incredible issue. Other issues, that sort. Okay, like I say, we can leave it for next time. Okay.
Sure.
Let me stop recording here.
Right, so we'll see if you're recording.
I'm stopping.